Vecna the Lich is Dead by Daylight's 36th killer, and with a new killer come 3 new killer perks. Now, as a Knight main, whenever we get new perks, I like to see whether they have any potential with the Knight. So what I'm going to do is look at a brief overview to see if there's any synergies that stand out with these new perks, and then I'll play a few games of Knight using only the Lich's perks to see how they work in practice. So the first perk we have is Dark Arrogance. Basically, this perk lets you vault windows 25% faster, with the trade-off that you're blinded and stunned for 25% longer. Now, I think Knight is uniquely able to mitigate the downsides of this perk, because one of the advantages that the Knight has over other killers is the ability to use his guards to deal with pallets, especially when he has the Carnifex available. And this means that you tend to hang back a bit from pallets, so you don't get stunned as much as you might with other killers. It's also common practice to drop a guard before you pick up a downed survivor to help disrupt anybody who rushes up to get a flashlight save, which means that you can counter getting blinded better than most other killers. So my first impression of this perk is that the Knight may be able to take advantage of the upside while avoiding the downside, which basically means that this perk just lets Knight vault 25% faster. Now the question is whether vault speed is a worthwhile bonus to use a perk slot for, and for the Knight, I think that the answer is probably not. In most places where you play around a vault, like at Shack, the Knight's main counterplay is to use a guard to force the survivor out of the loop, rather than following the survivor through a window. Of course, this perk is always going to be useful for chasing survivors through god vaults like second story windows, but the question remains whether a different perk could provide more value over the course of a match, and I would say almost certainly yes. Next up is the Lich perk Languid Touch, and this perk makes survivors who disturb crows within 36 meters of you become exhausted for 10 seconds. Now the nice thing about this is that the Knight can initiate chases with his guards, which will almost certainly cause the survivor to disturb a crow once they start running, and the Knight can do this from 32 meters away, which is within the perk's range. So my initial thought is that this is going to allow the Knight to make survivors exhausted for almost every chase that they join, which already seems really good, but I do want to check the meta to see how common exhaustion perks are that trigger in the middle of a chase. So judging by Nightlight GG, the 5 most common exhaustion perks are Lithe with a 24% pick rate, Sprint Burst at 13%, Dead Hard with 12%, Balanced Landing at 8%, and Background Player 4%. And of these perks, I think only Sprint Burst will avoid Languid Touch because the survivor is going to trigger it before they are able to disturb a bird. However, the other ones, like Live, Dead Hard, Balanced Landing, and Background Player, I think would almost always be countered by the Languid Touch exhaustion before the survivor has a chance to use the perk. So all in all, I think that this perk could make chases a lot easier for Knight and even make it easier for your guards to get a hit on their own. And finally, we have the perk Weave Attunement, which allows you to see the auras of survivors within 12 meters of a dropped survivor item. And then if a survivor picks up an item, it makes them oblivious to you for 30 seconds, which means that they can't hear your terror radius, so you might be able to catch them off guard, but typically oblivious isn't a super essential condition to have. And therefore, I think that this perk probably has the lowest synergy with the Knight because it relies entirely on survivor actions, and whether or not it's useful is basically out of your control. Of course, bringing other perks like Franklin's Demise or Lethal Pursuer can help make Weave Attunement more relevant, but for this video, I'm just considering synergy with the Knight's base kit. Now, the main use for this perk I can think of is to locate survivor auras and harass them at a distance by sending guards to that location. Although this relies on an item being on the ground, survivors being in range of it, and you being in a position to send a patrol at the moment that you see their auras, so I don't think you're going to be able to get consistent value out of Weave Attunement with the Knight. So these are my first impressions, but in order to test whether they hold up, I'm going to play some games using only Vecna's 3 perks on the Knight. So I'm going to walk through one of those games now to see how much value I was able to get out of each perk, and after the match, I'm going to give my overall impressions of the new killer perks. So if you just want the takeaways of how I think these perks work with the Knight, you can skip to that timestamp now. Otherwise, enjoy the match. Now, to actually see whether I get any value out of Languid Touch during the game, we do need to skip to the end just to see who had exhaustion perks so that we can track whether I got any value out of it during the match. So here we can see that Meg has Dead Hard, Claudette 1 has Balanced Landing, and Claudette 2 has Dead Hard. So let's keep an eye on those players and see if we were able to counter their exhaustion perks as we go through this game. So this is one of the games that I played using only the Lich perks on the knight. On the left we have Dark Arrogance, on the right we have Languid Touch, and on the bottom we have Weave Attunement. So we start off trying to find out where the survivors are, and we do hear someone fall in this structure, but I'd rather find someone in the open. So I'm going to send out a guard to see if I can detect anyone working on these gens, and we do find that this has progress on it. Turns out there were 2 people, and I think Claudette thought the Carnifex was chasing the other person because she got hit by him, which allows us to get our own hit off on the bard, who we try to cut off by sending out another assassin. They managed to slip by, but here, Languid Touch triggers, meaning that a survivor is exhausted. Our assassin starts chasing Meg, gets a hit. Now, I don't think the hit was because of Languid Touch, because she's using Dead Hard, so the exhaustion didn't matter, she couldn't use it anyway. But we do manage to find Claudette. We stay back so we don't get stunned an extra 25%. We get the hit off on her, and here we're going to use our fast vault to try to cut her off. And I think she could have kept running and dropped the vault, but she decides to double back. She still manages to drop it, but we have a Carnifex, and so we're just going to instantly break that. And then get our first down of the match. We're going to look around, see if we can see any auras from our Weave Attunement, but we don't. And then I'm pretty sure the survivors have been working on that generator that we first found them on. So I'm going to carry Claudette over here and then send out a guard to see how much progress that gen has. Sounds like quite a bit, so I'm going to use my assassin to kick it. And then Languid Touch triggers again, and you can hear the crows went off, which means that this Meg right here is exhausted. So we're going to send out our guard, try to detect her over there. Here we see auras from our Weave Attunement, and I think here Meg went down because she was exhausted, expected to be able to use Dead Hard, and then Jailer took her by surprise because it is really rare for Jailer to be able to hit anybody. So we're going to maintain control of this generator while we go over and pick up this Meg. And then just try to hook quickly here. Then go back, try to stop this gen from being completed. So we're going to send out our assassin. And we do detect somebody. And I think the extra second it took for them to complete allows the assassin to catch up. That gets us a down. And then here we're going to cut off the loop, making Claudette run out, and then get it down here. So now we're going to pick up this Claudette, if I can find her. There she is. And then we're going to hook her, and in the meantime, they managed to pick up the bard. But we know they have to be somewhere by the structure, so I'm sending a guard out. Didn't go as far back as I would have liked, so I'm going to go back here and scout out myself, trying to find people healing. And I do hear the heal. And so now we start chasing the bard. Remember, we have extra 25% vault from Dark Arrogance. That lets us do that faster. Run into a dead end. That's always good. And then here, I expected them to vault, and I thought I would follow, but no need. We're able to get it down. The unhook happened at the corner of main, so I'm sending a guard there to break up the healing. I think they spend a bit too long trying to get the heal off, which lets us down Claudette again. And now we're going to head back toward that corner. And now we see 2 people are healing the Claudette, and Languid Touch goes off. We're not sure who's exhausted. But we're gonna chase the one survivor we can see. Force her out of that loop. And then here, if we look again, I'm pretty sure she was able to use Dead Hard. If we go... And yeah, she ducks a little bit here and manages to get away. So I'm pretty sure that Languid Touch did not exhaust this Claudette. But our guard was able to get her anyway. And so we head back to this hook, and we get our first sacrifice of the game. So we can see that they healed, and the only place I can think of is under main, so we're just scouting out, see if we can find anyone. We do hear that a bit. Artifacts gets a hit on the bard, who runs into us, so we managed to get it down. We know someone else is around here healing, and there we see Claudette, so let's go cut her off with an assassin. She manages to get away, and as we pick up the bard, I think Meg is done, because she kind of just waves at us. Then our assassin on the return journey gets a detect and a down. Alright, so let's go pick up this Meg now. And we're gonna hook her on the other corner. Now we can see the aura of the item where we sacrificed the first Claudette. And so we're gonna see if we can get any Weave Attunement auras read off of that. We managed to down that Claudette. Still no auras being seen by that item. The bard manages to unhook Meg. That's our first hook on that Claudette. So at this point, I'm pretty sure that they ran a little further to try to heal. So I'm going to scout out behind this little structure, see if we can find people healing. And we do. And so we're going to wait for Carnifex to show us where they're going to jump off. And turns out we found the other one anyway. Carnifex downs the bard. And now we're going to chase Meg a little bit around Shack. See if we can get any Dark Arrogance value. She got me with that fake. But at the same time, didn't manage to get the Dead Hard to hit. And so we managed to hit her from Shack. We're going to pick her up, hook her. And at this point, the game's pretty much over. So we're going to go over, pick up the bard, and give them hatch. So now that I've played a few games, let's talk about my final takeaways about the Lich's perks in the context of the Knight. I don't think Dark Arrogance is really worth bringing. Although I was able to do a few tricky vaults to cut off survivors, it didn't really feel like the perk was affecting the matches all that much. I think other vaulting perks like Bamboozle, where you're able to shut down a vault, or Superior Anatomy, which lets you vault 40% faster instead of 25%, would be more worthwhile if that's the type of perk that you're going for. And when you also consider the amount of time that you can lose if a survivor happens to stun or blind you while you have Dark Arrogance, I can't really recommend the perk. So I'll give it 2 stars, meaning that it's not very detrimental, but neither is it very helpful. On the other hand, Languid Touch seems to have some value with Knight, as long as the survivor has an exhaustion perk that's not Sprint Burst. It's kind of difficult to know during the match when the perk's been triggered, so it's kind of hard to play around, but it does give your guards a better chance of hitting survivors and makes the chases easier once you join in yourself. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it will be a Knight staple from here on out, but I think it could have some uses, especially in a chase-oriented build. So because of that, I'm going to give Languid Touch 3 stars, meaning that you can get some value out of it, but there are probably some better options. As for Weave Attunement, in all of my games, I didn't really get much value out of it. Survivor items were rarely on the ground, and when I did see auras with it, I wasn't really prepared to capitalize on it. It's also worth mentioning that the perk is almost entirely dependent on survivors. They decide whether to bring items, whether to drop items, and whether to be around items. There isn't much that you as a killer can do to play around it. So all in all, I'll give Weave Attunement 2 stars because again, it doesn't make you worse, but it really doesn't help you all that much either. So those are my impressions of the Lich perks viewed through the lens of playing Knight. But what do you think? Are there any of these perks that you regularly use in your games? Do you think another killer can use these perks better? And what do you think of the Lich as a killer? I still haven't played him yet, but I am excited to because he seems a little bit like the Knight, where the Knight has to adapt to which guard is available. I feel like Lich is going to have to adapt to which spells he's able to use. But that's it for now, and I want to thank you very much for watching. Sincerely.